instead of going back to 2014, which is it was just what you were citing historically, I think we should just focus on the last couple of months, because really, even though I disagree with you on the way you define the last 10 years in Ukraine, it's really the last 6 weeks that matter. Because in the last 6 weeks,
I'm fine with that.
As you said, the game changed. You've got a new president, but there's a lot of intricacies that that erupted last Friday, and it's important to know that President Trump has said to the Europeans, and he said to Zelenskyy, they all have a role in the negotiations. But he said he is going to step in first and use his position of authority and leverage to get a serious conversation going. And he sent out General Kellogg to Ukraine, General Kellogg has met with all the politicians in Ukraine. He's met but not just Zelenskyy, but his staff. Spent a lot of time explaining Trump's thinking to them, so they're well aware of his thinking. You got the Europeans who feel like they've been shunted aside, and they don't like sitting on the sidelines. But at the same time, if you ask the Europeans, what's your solution for peace, they don't have one. Right. And so last week, when Zelenskyy came to Washington, he was told before he came, look, this is the first step of a process in Trump's negotiation strategy. And he was said, you don't need to even come to Washington. You can just sign this minerals agreement in Kiev. Zelenskyy stressed no, he wanted to come. He was warned it probably was not a good idea. Get the deal signed. Trump was meeting with President Macron. He was meeting with the Prime Minister of UK last week before Zelenskyy came into town, and he was working with them on the whole concept of a peacekeeping force, not a military force, a peacekeeping force. And so Zelenskyy was going to come in, sign the minerals agreement. Next week, they go to Europe. They were going to announce the peacekeeping portion of the strategy, and Trump was going to then move towards getting a meeting with Putin to start the discussions. And the issue that was of contention was Zelenskyy wanted security guarantees. If he couldn't have NATO, he wanted security guarantees. But security guarantees can be either a deal-killing solution, or it can be a salve to solve the problem. And Trump said you don't lead with that. You put that in its right context. Trump had a plan. He's the only one that had a plan. He had a strategy. Zelenskyy came to Washington, and when he came to Washington, he violated the commitment that he had made to Kellogg that he would save any disagreements on the strategy for the lunch afterwards and for private conversations. And the minerals agreement gets signed, and Trump believes, and was clearly communicated to Zelenskyy, that the minerals agreement brings the U.S. into the game in a way that the U.S. is not now. Yeah. And that will be leverage for Trump as the negotiator to do what he needs to do. Well, and so when Zelenskyy blew the deal up,
with American interests. No, I get it. I agree with your analysis, Paul.
But here's where the problem came.
All right, go ahead.
One more piece, Chris, and then anything you want to ask.
Go ahead.
Here's where the problem came. Zelenskyy sat with the Democrats on the Hill before he went to the White House, and they got him all juiced up. Because the Democrats weren't looking for peace. They were looking for a political issue, because they've been frustrated for the last 6 weeks that Trump has been implementing his campaign promises, having a job approval rating grow up, and they don't know how to deal with it. And so they used a campaign tactic instead of diplomacy in dealing with Zelenskyy, and he came into that meeting and blew the agreement. And that's the problem we have today. Now, the reality is, so now I won't filibuster.
You are filibustering, and I can't get over the fact that we're wearing the same thing, but yours looks better than mine. And the reason
you look good tonight.
I asked you to come on tonight, the reason I asked you to come on was you have an understanding of the culture in Ukraine. I think one of the things that Zelensky's getting painted with is, hey, where'd all the money go? Now, as we both know, a lot of our money goes missing when we give it to other countries, especially when they're in a bad way, okay? Ukraine's not special in that way. And in fact, they may be kind of on par if you do the numbers legitimately about how much is missing. But do you believe that's Zelensky's fault? Do you think he's dirty?
Well, that isn't the issue. The issue is Zelenskyy is imperial. And what's happened Oh, yeah, as you know, his term as office has expired. He's a martial law president, and that's fine. I mean, that's a legitimate position to be in. But he doesn't. His popularity in Ukraine is not very high. There are other forces in Ukraine that are just as much pro-Ukraine, anti-Russia, who would probably beat Zelenskyy in a campaign once the martial law expires. Zelenskyy survives by having a country at war. I'm not saying he likes war, but he survives by having a country at war. And so it's in his interest to find ways to stop the fighting, but not necessarily reach a peace right away until he can get strengthened politically.
Hey, thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your screen. And don't forget, click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.